Well, I know we're here because we are live. Welcome, everybody, to Drew Code Sports Talk. I am your host, Cody Johnson, and over on the opposite screen is my co-host, the handsome Andrew Wright, a.k.a. the voice of the Hornets. Andrew, what's going on, man?
Who are you talking about?
I'm talking about that tall glass of water that's in my screen.
What's going on, everyone? Excited to be here. This is 2 weeks in a row, right? Honestly, it feels like it's been a couple of weeks since we did it, but we did it so early last week that it's been, now we're on Friday. But
what's funny too, with all the news that's been going on in the NFL, it feels like one news cycle is like 2 weeks because, like, obviously we're going to talk about it later on today, like all the news that broke on like Monday and all that other stuff. But, you and I have only been exchanging Marco Polos. We haven't even had an opportunity to like sit down and do Drew Code up until today to even really talk about it. So for me, it feels like, this happened eons ago and we're late to the party. But, I'm really glad that we get to have you on the show as what we've been doing for years before you go back to the full swing of things. Speaking of full swing of things, how is Sanger West? How's the basketball team? How are you doing in life?
It's been real busy. I'm helping out with varsity and with JV when I get a chance to, but obviously also doing the Frosh team as well, and so we've been doing a lot of work, and we're in the thick of things now. We just started our league, which was on Thursday. That was our first game in league for varsity. So it's going to get crazy. I mean, they're going to have games every Tuesday and Thursday from now on until basically playoffs, which is going to be the end of February. And then we'll see what happens from there if we get into the playoffs, which I'm pretty sure we will. The way that we're on track, and we just beat Justin Garza, which was a huge win. Shout out to the girls on that. And, and then for my team, the Frosh team, we have 4 games. It's going to seem like it's back to back to back to back. I mean, we have a game on Thursday, and then we have 2 games next Saturday, which is going to be a tournament. And then we have a game on the Tuesday after that. So we have 4 games in a row that we normally don't do. The first game we had was in December, and then almost a month and a half, and now we have 4 games in a row. So
gotcha.
How's it going with you, man?
You know what? We are ramping back up with work because the holiday season is over. So my industry is starting to pick up a little bit. So a lot more meetings, a lot more stuff. I'm getting more involved in the community a little bit. So I have a couple of meetings lined up for next week for the city and stuff. So that's pretty exciting. But, also too, just trying to parse out like all the sports stuff going on, like trying to navigate like when we're going to be putting out content and videos. The whole TikTok thing kind of throws a wrinkle into it because, not trying to brag or anything, but TikTok is where we're probably seen the most in terms of our videos. But, obviously I've been befriending the Boom Broadcast guys, and, in the chat earlier was Darian. I've been chatting with a bunch of other sports podcasters about the news. So, I'm going to get into it shortly. But when the Raider news broke, I was getting DM'd on Instagram from almost every sports content creator that I know about what's going on with the Raiders, or how do you feel about this? So it's been interesting, but life in general, man, it's been really good. Been really quiet. We've cleaned up a lot of the stuff around the house, so that's always nice to declutter. And we're heading into 2025 in a good spirit. And I told you this, I'm trying to get back into getting in shape. And so hopefully I can get a workout in tomorrow, which, knock on wood, if that ever happens, because, life gets in the way. But, living the dream,
Yeah, of course. It's funny because right now, specifically with girls basketball, it's league, and we're doing what we call Little Hornets camp. So this is where all the younger kids come over, and we'll kind of do a camp for a while, and then we go to playoffs basically from there. And then there's talks of AAU, and it's just like it's gonna be nonstop for a while. But
oh no, AAU, did that bring back some trauma?
Yeah. Oh yeah. But no, I mean it'll be good. I mean, I kind of had to work out a deal with the other coaches because I'm still going to school. So
yeah,
there's gonna be some times that I'm not gonna be able to do things. So which is fine. They're cool with it. But yeah, it's gonna be a real busy season coming up.
Yeah.
So and I feel like we're already there.
Yeah.
So
Well, what's funny is like this was supposed to be, I mean, the vacation that I wouldn't say vacation, that's kind of a loose term, but the time off that you had from school and stuff, ironically enough, that was probably the most free time you were going to have. And I thought you were busy. At least every time you would send me a polo, you were off doing something or whatnot. Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, you're just going to ramp right back up to your busy time. So
sorry,
I know.
I'm sure you can hear my son just screaming.
He's just giving his commentary. That's all.
You know what? He's into dinosaurs right now, and so every toy in his room is running for their life right now. So
that makes a lot of sense. That's awesome. All right, dude. Let's get underway with some NFL news. As everyone knows, Black Monday came. A lot of head coaches were gone. Some, I think, Drew, you and I earlier in the season had talked about who we thought was going to go, who we thought was going to stay. I think for the most part, about 90% of the names we hit on. I think maybe some just haven't been official or like Mike McCarthy, for example. I thought he'd be gone. He's still there. Nick Sirianni probably is going to stick around.
Sounds like McCarthy's going to stay too.
Yeah. And, the whole Zach Taylor with Cincinnati, we really don't know the finality of that. So, I mean, that was one I assumed if they missed, he'd be gone. And I haven't seen anything that says otherwise. So for all intents and purposes, he's still their head coach. But with all the head coaching changes, we're going to dive into it. Obviously, the one that's leading off, not ours, I'll say. We'll save the Raider one for a little bit later. But Jerrod Mayo, first-year head coach with the Patriots, was let go after only one season. They finished with the exact same record from year to year. So they were 4-13 last year. They finished 4-13 this year. And he was let go after his first season. And Drew, should he have been fired after 1 year?
I don't think he should have been fired. And the reason I say that is, I don't know, from an outsider's perspective, I didn't watch a lot of Patriots games, so I could be way out of left field here. But for me specifically, I felt like the team was playing really hard for him. And they found a gem in Drake May. I mean, Drake May, I remember in the draft was kind of considered, is he good enough? Should he be it went from should he be the number one pick to should he even be drafted at some point? So it was kind of like, it's a risk taking him. And the Patriots said, we're going to take him. We believe in him, but he's going to sit behind a veteran quarterback and he'll learn. And I felt like maybe it wasn't a whole year, but it felt like it was good. Like Drake May kind of learned under Jacoby Brissett, and basically, I mean, no offense, but Brissett kind of set the tone of here's what not to do. So go in there and do your thing. And so Drake May, I felt like benefited from that. And so I thought that was really cool. But at the same time, I do, however, feel like the Patriots were really quick to the trigger on Jerrod Mayo. I think he deserves at least another year. And we're going to talk about Antonio Pierce in a little bit, but this is kind of my thought on this is I do feel like there were good things with Mayo, and I felt like he was a good motivator. As far as a head coach, I'm not sure. I'm not in the building. I don't really follow the New England Patriots that much, but from what I have seen, it felt like the guys really responded well to him. And so, I mean, I don't know. You found a gem in your quarterback that he kind of ended up starting late. Could you make the case of, well, then how come he didn't start him right away? Okay, we can make that case, but we also have to think about maybe it's in the best interest for not just the team but for the player. Maybe this is what Jerrod Mayo was hoping for, that Drake May would see, okay, this is how you play quarterback in the NFL. Let me see it under a few games. Okay, now I have kind of a an idea of what they're looking for me to do in my rookie season. Now I'm being thrown out there. Okay, now I'm going to, do whatever they need me to do. And so I felt like that's kind of where it went. But a lot of people might make the claim, well, he should have started right away. Well, maybe it wasn't going to be great. And so that's just kind of my 2 cents on that. But I felt like Jerrod Mayo should have probably got at least another year, or maybe at least half the year, and see where they're at from there.
Yeah, I think what you and I agree with is 1 year is really not enough of a sample size to say if a guy is going to be a good head coach or not. At least I don't believe so. And I think when we get on this topic, this is what my gripe is with the whole Antonio Pierce thing. So, you're right. We didn't watch a whole lot of Patriots game. And if I'm being honest, I don't know if year over year, offensively or defensively, they were better. If I'm looking at their roster, I would have been shocked if they did win more than 4 games. And the fact that they won 4 games, I think, is something they should be very fortunate on in general. But, to your credit, Drew, they did find a gem in Drake May, picked him, 3rd overall, I believe, in the past draft. And sure, they did not start him right away, but for all the criticism that the Patriots have gotten, I don't think not starting him week 1 is going to make a difference. What are we talking about? Maybe they get 5 wins compared to 4 wins, where there was some people that were saying that Caleb Williams, who was the number 1 overall pick, shouldn't have started quite yet. He didn't look ready. So, I mean, I think too, we're moving the goalposts a lot on some of these rookie quarterbacks. And in terms of the head coach, looking at this roster, dude, I do not know what Jerrod Mayo was supposed to do with it. And here's what sucks. We don't know what kind of coach Jerrod Mayo was going to be because he didn't last more than 1 season. I don't think 1 season is enough to build your culture. I don't think that's enough time to get all the guys or draft them or develop them the way that you have a 5-year plan that some other head coaches have. And I'm going to give you just a couple of stats. So Drake May did really good in his rookie year, threw for 66% completion, had just a little under 2,300 yards. But the leading receiver on the team offensively was a tight end in Hunter Henry. And then second from that is a guy named Douglas, I think, Demario Douglas, who is a second-year player. So it's not like he had a plethora of weapons to drive or to throw the ball down to. They still had some okay players. So I don't know what Jerrod Mayo was supposed to achieve with that team that would have kept him his job. And I think what's disappointing is I'm wondering now if Jerrod Mayo was just a hire to kind of get the Rooney Rule out of the way, just so that way now they can go after another coach that they originally wanted. Because I don't feel like Jerrod Mayo got a fair shake, and I don't feel like he lost the locker room. So I don't feel like this was a great move for the Patriots. And if you saw, I think they put in a request to interview Aaron Glenn, the DC of Detroit, and they denied it. And I think a lot of that is because of how they treated Jerrod Mayo and how literally the game hadn't even been officially called, stats confirmed yet. And yet he got a message that he's, they fired him. Yeah. I'm pretty certain they had that cooked up from the start. He could have gone, they could have won the wild card and he probably wouldn't have been back. So I don't know. I think what the Patriots do is a little shifty now that Bill Belichick isn't there. And it's kind of now like a GM and Robert Kraft, I guess, kind of running operations. It just, I don't know. It felt like they did Jerrod Mayo super dirty. So I wasn't a big fan of it.
Yeah, I hated getting that notification. It was right after their game. They were like, oh, he's fired. And I was like, that was kind of quick. That was a real quick trigger. But yeah, man, you make some good points too. It doesn't, it almost seems like, hey, we're just hiring this guy because we couldn't find the guy that we wanted and, kind of get the Rooney Rule out of the way. He's a guy that, we don't think is going to, do what we thought Bill Belichick was going to be able to do. And so he's just kind of filling a spot until we can actually find our guy. And I think that's a little messed up because I do feel like Jerrod Mayo, like you said, he never lost the locker room. It's not like the guys weren't playing for him. And it's the same way I feel about Antonio Pierce. He never lost the locker room. Did we have some unfortunate events happen under Pierce or maybe under Mayo? I'm sure there were some, questionable things, but listen, he's a first-year head coach. He's not going to be perfect. I mean, it's a little concerning for me. It really is, because why was that so quick to the trigger? But, other guys who, like Mike McCarthy's, are getting a real good fair shake when we've seen enough of Mike McCarthy. Like, I'm sorry, we've seen enough. It's not great. It's not terrible. But I don't think Jerrod Mayo has gotten enough coaching experience to be able to say he's not good, he's not great. Like, we can't say that. Right now, is he a good coach? Maybe, maybe not. I would probably go with he's still in what's the purgatory. He's not in heaven, he's not in hell right now. He's kind of in purgatory right now. And so that's kind of the way I look at Jerrod Mayo. And so I feel like that's unfair. And I've been on here multiple times saying I believe that head coaches need at least 3 years.
Yeah.
After those 3 years, or sometimes even into that second year, you already know, okay, like even into, like with Josh McDaniels, you could tell this isn't going anywhere. It's getting worse, and he lost the locker room. When a guy hasn't lost the locker room, such as Coach Mayo here, give him another year at least. Like, at least. But anyway.
Well, here's the thing. So Bill Belichick, who basically, obviously, as everyone knows, was the head coach before Jerrod Mayo, obviously, all the Super Bowls, Tom Brady, the whole story. Do you know what his record was in his first year of coaching with the New England Patriots?
I want to say 5-12.
5-11.
5-11.
So he won one more game than Jerrod Mayo, and yet was given 20 years to correct the ship. Put that in perspective. Like, he was given
20 years.
He was given over 20 years. Yeah. And Bill Belichick's last year, which was last season, record was 4-13. Now, granted, Bill Belichick, I think it was like a mutual parting amongst the organization and Bill Belichick. But point being, though, is yes, with the success of Tom Brady, the Patriots dynasty, you're not going to take away from Bill Belichick. Not trying to say that Bill Belichick is a scrub. Not even trying to say that Jerrod Mayo is on the same level of Bill Belichick. I think my point being is how would we know now? You only gave him one season, and in that one season, he won one less game than Bill Belichick, who he's replacing. And in fact, the year that he's replacing Bill Belichick, he actually got the exact same record as the previous year. No difference. So I think just like what you had said, it's now just like, we're just checking off a box and doing whatever. And it really has no meaning now. And it's more of a waste of time. So, and it's a disgrace too. Like, the NFL needs different groups to coach, and you can't just rely on the same group of people. Like, you got to change it up, and you'll never know that if you always go with the same formula. Because it's weird how some of these coaches, and you pointed out Mike McCarthy, I will say Mike McCarthy was given enough time to get into the playoffs, and so that does make a little bit of a difference. But like, you look at, another coach like who was around for a really long time that sucked, like Matt Eberflus was way past his time. He should have been let go like seasons ago, and he he didn't finish this season, but he probably stuck around a lot longer than he should have been. But at least he was given I think 3 or 4 seasons to even figure out, okay, what are we going to do? So yeah, let him know, Cam. Let him know.
I was gonna say, son is going for it right now.
Yeah,
and my dog's over here drinking water.
you got a lot of commotion going on right there.
Going on right now. This is the time that everyone's active.
That's right. All right, so moving on to the next one. Doug Pederson of the Jacksonville Jaguars. You and I called this one way back earlier in the season that he was going to be fired, and it was made official on Monday, of course, that he was let go. However, the GM, his job is safe, but the owner came out and said that if the head coach wanted the GM gone, he would let him go. So that's an interesting note to say. Drew, do you think
would you even say that?
Drew, do you think Doug Pederson will wind up a head coach again? Do you think that this was the right move for the Jaguars? What are your thoughts?
See, I think this is a perfect example of what we were talking about. We've seen Doug Pederson be really successful, but then he's kind of come down to earth. And I think that's okay to say. He had a lot of success, but he also has had some really bad lows.
Right.
And so my son, he's on it right now. Anyway, Doug Pederson is a well-known name, and I feel like Doug Pederson is a really good, I would even venture to say a great offensive coordinator. I don't feel like the Jacksonville Jaguars offense was bad. I feel like their offense was actually really good. But in terms of him as being a head coach, I don't think he was the guy that Jacksonville was hoping for. Like in Philadelphia, he had a lot of success. But you can now make the argument, knowing what you know now, that maybe Andy Reid was kind of the culprit and why the Eagles were so successful. Now, Doug Pederson has a great offensive mind, and I feel like he really helped that offense, specifically Nick Foles, have this immensely tremendous year. But now we're talking about the Doug Pederson in Jacksonville, and although, as I'm saying, the offense looked fine, I don't think there was any problems there. At the same time, I just don't think he's a good head coach. I think he's a good X's and O's guy, which says to me, that's a great offensive coordinator. He will be hired somewhere as an offensive coordinator, but in terms of a head coach, I don't think he's going to be a head coach anymore. I think we've seen enough of Doug Pederson to be able to say he's a great coordinator, not a good head coach.
Yeah, that's very interesting because what I was saying, because I was invited on to Out of Pocket with Boom Broadcasting. I think it was earlier this week, and we were talking about it. And my thing about it is like, look, Doug Pederson is a former Super Bowl head coach, won it with Nick Foles. No doubt that offensively his mind is there. I think what was troubling is the expectations that we had for the Jaguars fell so far down what we thought that they were going to do with Trevor Lawrence, with some of the weapons. At one point they had Calvin Ridley. They had drafted this young running back out of Clemson that was a teammate of Trevor Lawrence. And for some reason, they just couldn't break through the ceiling. And I remember, I think it was Doug Pederson's second year with the team coaching, and they start off 5-0 or 5-1, 6-1 or something like that, like a really good record. And yet they ended the season 9-7, missing the playoffs, or at least they got into the wild card. And I think they upset the Chargers, but they just never seemed to get over that expectation of okay, now we're a playoff team. Now we're an AFC threat. Defensively, you can say part of that reason was, they were giving up leads and whatever. But I do think that this is kind of a negative to Doug Pederson because for all intents and purposes, you had a really high-powered offense. You have a really good offensive philosophy, and yet the Jaguars fell into Jaguar ways. And as far as I know, the owner gave him whatever he wanted. Now, maybe him and the GM couldn't get on the same page about free agents or whatever. But the point being is Doug Pederson just for some reason could not change the culture, could not get them into a winning mentality, and really underperformed. Doug Pederson, I think, is a good enough coach to be a coordinator somewhere in the league if he wants to be. Maybe he takes a step back and goes to college football instead and gets that confidence up and does that. But, I don't know how long it'll be, but Doug Pederson's coaching is going to be very similar to, and I'm going to make this analogy. Doug Pederson is like the Doc Rivers of the NFL. He's got one championship, and we're all trying to wonder, okay, is he that good of a head coach, or is it just, he had that one championship, and that's really what his resume hangs on because he really doesn't have any other tricks outside of that. That's what Doug Pederson gives me that feeling. And so, I think the Jaguars need to make a change. They need a new voice. I'm wondering what they want to do with Trevor Lawrence because, in my opinion, for the number one pick, all the analysis and all the stuff about what he was going to be coming out of the draft, in my opinion, he has fallen short of that expectation. You forget sometimes that he was a number one overall pick because of how either bad he plays or how he doesn't kind of give his team that edge to win. Like there's something about Trevor Lawrence that he's not the reason they're coming over the top and winning. If anything, sometimes in certain games, he's the liability. So that's what I'm wondering what the Jaguars want to do with the whole team in general. Are should they look for a new quarterback? Should they shop, Trevor Lawrence? So I'm not sure what the Jags want to do. Right decision about Doug Pederson, but what coach now is going to come in there and figure out all this mess? So,
yeah, I mean, kind of what you were talking about with Trevor Lawrence. I feel like the reason we don't know about Trevor Lawrence is because he's not a bad quarterback, but he hasn't gotten better. And that I think that speaks in itself. In the NFL, you have to get better and better. Look at Lamar Jackson. He came in and people were saying he's probably a project. He's not a guy that I want to build a franchise around because he's more of a running quarterback. And he was like, nah, forget that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go work twice as hard, and I'm going to become a pocket passer and a guy who can also run when I need to. And look at his numbers now. I mean, of course, you can argue, hey, he's got Derrick Henry, but his passing numbers are phenomenal. I mean, arguably, he could be the MVP this year. I mean, I think it's a real case between him and Josh Allen. And so that's the example that you want to see in your quarterback. You not only want to see a guy who was successful in college, of course you want guys who are going to be successful from college, but at the same time, you want to see them get better. And where Trevor Lawrence, and this was the issue that a lot of people were saying about him coming into the NFL was, does he love football? He likes football, but he has other interests. So are those other interests more like getting better at football? or are those going to be, is it more so like, I want to invest in this, I want to invest in that, which is not bad. I'm not hating on the guy, but for all intents and purposes, he's gotten a couple of coaches fired because of that. And so this is why, like, yeah, Trevor Lawrence is nice, but he's not getting any better and he's not getting worse. I just feel like he's stayed the same. And that's why now there's conversations about, do they keep him? And I think that's a real conversation.
And I think another conversation too is like, if you get rid of him, what do you replace him with? The draft is pretty weak this year, other than Ward and Sanders. And then two, like, who do you get as a bridge quarterback? Because in theory, like, assuming you go Kirk Cousins or, who would be another quarterback that would probably be available? Maybe Daniel Jones, I guess, in some weird way. But, like, you get all these like quarterbacks and you still think like, look, Trevor Lawrence talent wise is better than them. But, Trevor Lawrence as a number one overall pick, he's not a bust. Let's be clear about that. He's not that bad, but
he's not been bad.
No, but he hasn't been like a number one pick. Like if you told me he came out of the third round, I'd be like, okay, I'd expect this. Number one overall pick, you better have gotten a playoff in there. You better have gotten some wins, a couple of repeats. Like Joe Burrow is a first overall QB and almost got an MVP by getting his team into the playoffs, and they've already been to the Super Bowl. So, a lot holds on a franchise quarterback. And if you're just not up to snuff, like, what are you doing? And to your credit, second coach in his career that he's gotten fired. So, okay. So I'm going to skip the Cowboys question if you're okay with that, because it's Mike McCarthy and who knows what's going on with that.
He's going to stay. I mean, basically what it was is Bears asked the Cowboys if they could interview Mike McCarthy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's more like at the time we weren't sure if Mike McCarthy was even going to be the head coach for the Cowboys, but now it sounds like, or seems like, because nothing has been done, that he is in fact going to stay with the Cowboys. And I think the Bears would be an absolute fool to try and get him. Like, he's going to change something. I'm sorry. Like, I think Mike McCarthy is a good coach. I don't think he's a bad coach. I think we've seen plenty in his resume that says, hey, he's good. He's not a terrible coach. But I don't think he brings the Bears to the next step. I think the Bears might get a little better, but how much better, I don't think it's going to be that much. I don't think they compete with the Packers still.
Yeah, that's a good point. I just think the way that Jerry Jones is treating Mike McCarthy, and Mike McCarthy is just, I don't want to say taking it lying down, but he hasn't really stood up for himself. It's like, yeah, sure, Jerry, I'll come back if you want me to, kind of a thing. And it's like,
I mean,
dude, Jerry is denying you interview requests to, even if the Bears job is not the right gig for him, he's denying you the right to go and interview to even see if it's a fit or not. He won't extend your contract. He kind of talks, both sides of his mouth when it comes regarding you, and has made it very clear that, this is your last year and you have a lot to prove. So I'm just, for Mike McCarthy's sake, I'm like, dude, whenever you just have confidence to say, look, Jerry, thanks, but no thanks, I'm not dealing with this no more, and then to move on. But it sounds like what you said, he's probably going to end up with him again. And who knows, maybe it's like a 2-year prove it deal. And now we're right back to the situation where Jerry Jones is talking something in the media and Mike McCarthy's now got to worry about that and focus on football. And this team this year just was distracted, had injuries, really underperformed. And that's why that's why they are in this debacle today. So anyways, another debacle is a team in New York, not the Jets, but the Giants. They are actually retaining both GM and head coach. Drew, do you think that's a good idea?
I like Brian Daboll, so it's hard for me to say it's not a good idea, but I like Brian Daboll so much that I want to say, I feel like he should leave. I feel like he actually would be pretty good in Chicago, if I'm being honest.
Sure.
The GM has had a horrendous year this year. Horrendous year. I'm in shock that he is not the GM, or that he's still the GM.
Yeah, me too.
Bro, you were literally on camera saying, I don't think Saquon Barkley is worth $12 million. Yeah, well, Saquon could have broke the record, but they sat him.
yards later.
Yeah, they sat him. Come on, dude. You look ridiculous.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm not going to pay him that. But Daniel Jones, $45 million. Here you go, buddy. Are you kidding me?
And then you cut him 6 months later.
And then you cut him, and he goes away, and you're like, problem solved. Drew Lock, come in. And I'm not going to hate on Drew Lock. I actually thought Drew Lock was okay, but it makes me laugh because it's like, dude, you've been caught on camera not once, not twice, but 3 times saying some dumb crap.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, we'll stick with you. And I'm like, why? What has he done? So I'm very surprised about that. But with Brian Daboll, I actually do think Brian Daboll has been good. And I know this might be clickbait here, okay? But sure. I actually don't think the Giants' defense has been that bad, and I don't think their offense has been that bad. I think Daniel Jones was bad.
Yeah.
And then we saw what the offense looked like without Saquon Barkley, and it was like, oh, he was kind of important, maybe he helped. Okay. But for all intents and purposes, I actually don't think the Giants are as dysfunctional as maybe people think they are. Mm-hmm. I think at the top, they're dysfunctional, organizationally. But when you talk about the head coach, when you talk about some of the offense and defense as a whole, I feel like aren't as bad as what we think they are. But it doesn't help when you have a guy who should be a backup at your quarterback. I mean, look at the Raiders. I don't think the Raiders' offense or defense was all that bad. I just think the quarterback position was that bad.
Right.
And so I feel like that with the Giants, where I do think the Giants have a lot of pieces in place where they can be successful, but not only do they have to trust the head coach, they have to get the quarterback right. And if you get the quarterback right, I can see this team going from what did they have? 4 wins this year. I could see them even going up to 8 if you just get the quarterback right. If you get a guy who's competent at the quarterback position, I see that going well. So for me, it doesn't. I'm not surprised that Daboll stayed. I'm really surprised the GM stayed.
Yeah, what's funny is I feel the exact same way. I think Brian Daboll's a good coach. I mean, first year, he actually helped turn around the Giants, made Daniel Jones kind of like a relevant quarterback in the league. So that's surprising in and of itself. And I think over the years in the draft, some of the receivers, I think they've actually pieced together a pretty respectable receiving core, especially now that they have Malik Neighbors in there. And I agree, Daniel Jones probably was holding back the potential of this team. And they were really trying hard to say, like, no, Daniel Jones can get us to the next level. And if anything, he probably set them back about 2 seasons. But here's the thing about their defense. I think their defense played really well throughout the season up until they all knew that there's no point to really playing that hard because they're not going anywhere, which is why, like, after the Daniel Jones being released, essentially, that defense didn't play nearly as tough as it had up to that point. Like, they have a pretty respectable defense, and with a couple of other pieces, they actually could be a force to be reckoned with. And I agree, like, quarterback could be something that they need to just even get them slightly better. But that front office, though, like being on camera to say, no, I don't feel like paying Saquon Barkley. And here's the biggest indictment. It's one thing to say, look, I don't want to pay that much for a running back. Cool. And the reason why I say that is because the Raiders, in a way, kind of did the same thing. They wouldn't pay Josh Jacobs a high annual salary. So he went to Green Bay where they were willing to do that. Fine. But what was bad is that Saquon went to a divisional rival. That's what was bad. He could have gone anywhere else, but not to the Commanders, the Cowboys, and the Eagles. And he wound up on the Eagles, where the Eagles with him are essentially Super Bowl favorites in the NFC just about. And Saquon was in the MVP conversation for 90-something% of the season. And you're still on camera like, no, I don't think, do we think he'll be that valuable for our team? No, let's not pay him $15 million, but let's pay Daniel Jones $45 million. Now, neither of them are on the Giants team, which is, to your point, Drew, why are you still on the team? And how did you make it through these round of firings? So I'm very curious to see what they do in the offseason. I'm sure Brian Daboll is frustrated with the state of the situation, and I'm sure he would love to have a team where it's all together, because I do think, like what you said, the Giants can be respectable because I think that offense can get going. They have good weapons. It's just they need a quarterback, and you're not, unfortunately, Daniel Jones is not the answer. And they let him go. And if for some reason they thought Saquon was also the reason to let him go as well. So I think that's what I'm stuck on, is that, which is why I would agree. Like, I'm surprised he made it through the firestorm. So
I think that's the most craziest. I mean, I don't know. The Jerrod Mayo, Antonio Pierce was kind of like surprising or whatever. But the most surprising thing to me this year was the GM of the Giants retaining his position with the New York Giants. That is the most wild thing I've heard in the NFL this year. It's crazy.
You want to talk about job security? That guy has it somehow, some way.
Hey, you know what? Sometimes loyalty pays off, I guess.
It must. All right, Drew. So I think we've come to the part where we don't want to talk about it, but we're going to. Of course, on Monday and the other day, we got the news. Of course, Antonio Pierce was let go by the Raiders after one season. I think his record was like not 8 and I think it was like 8-20 something or whatever. So it wasn't great. Or 8-17, I think, is the record. And so the Raiders officially dismissed Antonio Pierce. So now the Raiders are paying Jon Gruden, Josh McDaniels, Antonio Pierce to not coach the team, and they will pay someone who will, when they do hire somebody who will probably be like a first-time head coach, which means he's going to warrant like a super high contract because he's the top name. And I'm referring to, like, let's say a Ben Johnson type of coach. We may have to shell out a large contract for something like that. So we'll have 4 coaches on the books that thankfully don't hit the salary cap. But we're paying 4 of them, and one of them hasn't even been hired yet. But here are some names that I just want to say that the Raiders are interested in interviewing, and I want to get your take on the situation. But first, I do want to ask, with the Antonio Pierce thing, what are your initial thoughts? I know that you gave us a video, but how are you feeling now that we've gone a couple of days after the fact?
I'm still a little upset. Like, kind of what we were talking about with the Jerrod Mayo thing was, I don't feel like you can make the argument that he had basically a year and a half as the head coach. You can make that argument. But for me, Antonio Pierce didn't get a fair shake like I thought he should have. Because kind of to our point, what we were talking about with Jerrod Mayo was Antonio Pierce never lost the locker room, and he didn't pick the quarterback that he wanted. And I can see what his thought process it was when he went. And this is what I've seen online a lot of. They're like, well, this dude picked Gardner Minshew over Aiden O'Connell. Like, why would you do that? And well, I think what the thought process was is at the time, Gardner Minshew can move. He'll run every now and then. He's not afraid to do that. He's played more games as a starting quarterback than Aiden O'Connell. So I understand the thought process in that. And for all intents and purposes, I've said this ad nauseum now, Aiden O'Connell is a guy who will throw the short stuff. He's more conservative. He's not really going to go for the big home run pass, but Gardner Minshew will. And that's a better transition from like what Derek Carr was to going to Gardner Minshew, who's not going to take as many shots as Carr was, but he is going to take some shots. And I think that's what he wanted. He wanted still some of that same mentality that they had, the previous year. And now going into this year, they didn't want it to be such a huge transition. So they're like, hey, let's start Gardner Minshew. Usually, I think also this did play a factor in it, that Gardner Minshew usually when he starts the season or starts his first game, his first like 2-3 games, he's really good. He looks like, oh shoot, okay, maybe he is a starter in the NFL. And I feel like you and I were kind of like, maybe we don't want to jump ahead of ourselves, but he's starting to kind of look pretty decent. And then after a while, his judgment starts falling apart, and that's where he gets in trouble, and that's what he was starting to do. And so then when Aiden O'Connell came in, it was like, oh, this guy, he doesn't turn the ball over. And it's like, yeah, but we're losing that offensive power that we had with him. And so that's kind of the trade-off that Antonio Pierce had, and I don't think that's necessarily we can blame him, but I don't think that was the nail in the coffin type thing. I felt like Antonio Pierce, okay, he made a mistake. There were a lot of things I would text you. I was like, I don't like that about Antonio Pierce. Like, why wouldn't you call a timeout here? Or why wouldn't you make this call? Or why wouldn't you maybe take your time at this point? Like, I'm not understanding. Why is no one telling him this? So, but that's a first-year head coach. Like, he's going to make mistakes like that. And so what drives me up the wall is that we're acting like Antonio Pierce had been coaching all these years. Maybe he coached a high school team and he kind of helped out with – I mean, from what I've seen, I think Antonio Pierce at this moment is a better defensive coordinator. I think he would be an extremely good defensive coordinator. But I don't also think that he got a fair shot in Vegas. I think he deserved at least another year, maybe half a year. Then you can say, okay, he's not doing any better or he's not doing any worse. So maybe we just need to cut ties and go after someone else. It infuriates me too, because then they let go of Tom Telesco. And I told you this, and I know we're going to get to that in a little bit, but with Tom Telesco, they didn't let him go until a couple of days after they had fired Antonio Pierce. And I told you what it makes me think is they were like, Tom, you need to fire Antonio Pierce, and we got to look for the head coach. He fired Antonio Pierce, and to me it felt like because they didn't want to get their hands dirty. And then they're like, oh, you know what, Telesco, why don't you give us your list of head coaches that you would choose? And he was like, oh, I'd go here, here, here. This is who I set up. They're like, set up the interviews. Okay, Tom, see you later. Yeah. And it was like, whoa, wait, what? and that's not what good organizations do. Now you could say, Tom Brady's taking over the team. This is Tom Brady's thing. I don't know whose idea this was. But right now, the Las Vegas Raiders are not a good organization. We are in turmoil. And I would make the argument that when we had Jon Gruden, we were not in turmoil. There were a lot of things going on with the players, but for all intents and purposes, we were getting better and better each year. And Jon Gruden's credit, he was always saying there are players that want to come over and they want to play, and they did. But with all the email thing that happened and all that, finally came down to earth, and we've never recovered since. And I maybe it's that, maybe it's something else.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm saying is this team, as much as the Raider fans are angry because it feels like we're always in this, we got to look for a new head coach, we got to look for a quarterback, we got to get our defense better, we got to get a GM, whatever. It seems like we're always in this. But I feel, and I think you might agree with me, the whole Jon Gruden era, the newer one with Derek Carr and all that, it wasn't turmoil. There was some things going on with players like Antonio Brown, but even then we were like, nah, that's not Antonio. That's not the Raiders. That's Antonio Brown. And I think we're still seeing that even on Twitter. I don't know if you follow him or Instagram, but that's the thing that I've noticed is the Raiders weren't always dysfunctional, but because we just constantly do the same things over and over. And like, I understand to a point where you're like, well, we made a mistake, we're going to let you go. But I felt like Antonio Pierce wasn't necessarily a mistake. It was, did it work out this year? No, but I felt like there were some good things and some bad things. And those bad things are things that you can build on. And so that's what made me so frustrated that we let go of Antonio Pierce, because I don't feel like he got a fair shot.
You know what, man? You think you said it very poetically, and we've got a couple of comments. Shout out to Boom Broadcasting. Mike here says, Antonio Pierce, Tom Telesco shouldn't have been fired after they were told that they were staying. And then he was responding to your take about Gardner Minshew, where he says it runs out very quick, just like Fitzmagic. Yeah. Very, very, very true. Here's what I'll say about the whole Antonio Pierce thing that I'm frustrated with is all the rumors of what coach do we want, Mike Vrabel, you know, we want to get a guy that's like Dan Campbell and all these other things, former players that are now head coaches that turned around organizations. But again, the same thing I pointed out with Jerrod Mayo, who only got one season. That's all he got. At least Antonio Pierce got basically half of a season and then a full season, and then we let him go. My problem with all that is, like, when is failure okay for them to learn from mistakes? You know, like, head coaches, in order for them to be established, they need to go through the losses. They need to know what didn't work when they tried something. They need to see what did work. They need to utilize that to the players. They need to bring in the players that they know are going to carry out, you know, their culture, their scheme, all this other stuff. So why can't Antonio Pierce be given that same respect? I saw this crazy thing on Instagram, and I think I sent it to you, where in the last 35 years, there's only been 4 head coaches in the Raiders history that have lasted in 3+ seasons. Only 4 out of 35 years. That is a crazy, crazy stat. That's the amount of turnover that comes with head coaching that the Raiders have done, because we just don't understand like what it takes to have culture being ingrained, improved. You're going to go through ebbs and flows. Like, not every organization's going to wind up with a Mike Tomlin that does not have a losing season. They may like have a winning season and not be in the playoffs or get in the wild card and then bounce the very next round. But how do we know that that wouldn't have been Antonio Pierce if we don't give him the time to fail? Don't give him the time to improve. Don't give him the time to draft his guys, to develop them. Because listen, Tom Telesco, say what you want about him not re-signing Josh Jacobs, not finding a comparable quarterback for Antonio Pierce. And also, too, maybe it was his idea not to extend that extra year that, what's the OC that we all, Cliff Kingsbury. Maybe it was his idea to not give him that extra year, which is why then we ended up with Luke Getsy. Maybe that was a Tom Telesco thing, but that has nothing to do with Antonio Pierce in the sense of like, he still did his best with that. Davante Adams leaving for New York is not because Antonio Pierce is a bad coach. Davante Adams just wanted to be in New York to be with his buddy, and they ended up with the exact same record as the Raiders. In fact, an argument could be made is they're in worse. Well, actually, I don't know who's worse now because we have neither a head coach and a GM, and so do they. So now the jury's out on that.
We're in the same boat.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's my point exactly. He goes from one organization that he needs stability to more dysfunctional, now also needing stability organization. So I don't put that at the feet of Antonio Pierce. That's not fair. And just even in the last offseason, Antonio Pierce had the fans behind him. He had Max Crosby, Devontae Adams. All the Raider fans and faithfuls were really pulling for him. And now he got the job. But after one season, you can't then just say, oh, you know what, you're not good. We got to take this away. We need time to improve. You need time to build that culture. You need time to infiltrate and facilitate all this. So I don't think it's fair to say, like, you know, he was the problem. Do I think that Tom Brady being a minority owner does affect this a lot? Yeah, I do think so, because I don't see Mark Davis really pulling the trigger on this, considering Mark Davis probably telling Antonio Pierce, you're good. And then all of a sudden, Tom Brady taking over a lot of the football operations is now literally resetting the Raiders back. And earlier this season, we were like, we just need a quarterback. Now we need a quarterback. We need a GM. We need a head coach. We need a culture. We need so much more now. And it was only just one season of football. So I think
even to your point right there, we're not only are we going to need a GM or a head coach, a quarterback, we're going to need a GM, head coach, an offensive coordinator, probably a defensive coordinator, probably all new strength conditioning coaches. Then we're going to need a quarterback. We're going to figure out what we're going to do in the draft. And then we're probably going to have to sign some free agents, probably a free agent quarterback. Like, now you're adding all of this on top of everything.
This is like one of those things where, like, you buy a house, you want to fix up something, so you pull back the walls, and then all of a sudden you then say, you know what, instead of tearing down this wall to expand the space, let's just take it all down to the studs, which is essentially what the Raiders are doing with going with needing a new head coach now, getting an OC. Now they're going to need a defensive coordinator now because Patrick Graham's not going to come back. So we're very fortunate that we're just in this position where, you know what, we have really nothing going on. Might as well do a reset. Like, now I'm almost thinking that Max Crosby will probably be dealt for assets, because why have him? And unfortunately, like, the Raiders are set back now for at least 3 years. So at least that's what I'm assuming.
Yeah, I agree with you with the Max Crosby thing. It's like, dude, how many times can this guy want to go through this BS? Like, I'm sorry. Like, after a while, that gets frustrating, and it's like, all right, dude, I got to get out of here. Like, he's arguably one of the best, at least top 5 pass rushers in the NFL. I would argue probably top 3. And he sniffed the playoffs maybe once.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I'm just curious. So I updated these in the notes. I'm not really going to run through these right now, but is there a head coach and a GM that you would want the Raiders to go after, that you think would put us in the best position during this rebuild?
Pete Carroll is the head coach. No, just kidding. No, I like Pete Carroll. I like Pete Carroll, but I don't think long term, and we have to go after. And I agree with the Raiders on this. They have put it out there to, you know, the ESPNs and Fox Sports and all that. They put it out into the world that, hey, we want a young, offensive-minded head coach. So, cool. That shows me that not only are we looking for a head coach who's offensive-minded, but we're looking for a young guy that we can build upon, that we can, you know, go multiple years with. Now, I thought that's what we have with Antonio Pierce. He's a young guy, but, you know, what am I?
Yeah.
I'm a nobody. Hey, listen, I feel like I'm an offensive-minded guy. Give me a call, Vegas. Anyway, and you can fire me after 1 year. I would be okay with that. I'll still take that money, bro. Anyway, but no, for real, I mean, first and foremost, my number one is still going to be Ben Johnson. And I even told you I was watching Colin Cowherd, and he brought up some good points. Listen, any offensive coordinator in the league would be successful, I would say minus Luke Getsy, would be successful with that Lions offense.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a fair point. That's a really good team. Arguably top 3 offensive line in the league. You're really deep at receiver. You have 2 great running backs. You have a guy in Jared Goff who's been to a Super Bowl. And then you're talking about the defense. Yeah, the defense has kind of been in turmoil, but you talk about Aaron Glenn doing a job with that defense, with all the injuries that they've had.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing in itself. And so his point was, that's why I think Aaron Glenn is probably the better prospect. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad take. I wouldn't agree with that. I would still go with Ben Johnson because I do feel like Ben Johnson built up Jared Goff even more, because like you and I were talking about on Marco Polo, was that Ben Johnson inherited a Jared Goff who, for all intents and purposes, was shipped to Detroit to end his career.
Mm-hmm.
And not in a good way. Not like, oh, he's going to go, 12 more years with Detroit. No, it was like, dude, you're going to probably be in Detroit for a couple of years and everyone's going to forget about you. And that's kind of what it felt like that move was. And not only did he build up Jared Goff, but now Jared Goff is, I would probably put him as a top 10 quarterback right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's crazy to say. Maybe other people would say that, but I don't know. The way that he's been running that offense really well, and obviously the offensive line helps, of course. But still, you can chalk that up to coaching. That offensive line is good because of maybe Ben Johnson. I don't know, but he would be my number one. If I had a number two, Liam Coen, the OC from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I actually would really like. I wouldn't mind Mike Vrabel. I really do like Mike Vrabel. I know he's more of a defensive-minded head coach, but I actually like the culture that he created in Tennessee. And since he's left, Tennessee has been weird at best.
Mm-hmm.
And my other guy I would probably say would be Aaron Glenn. I actually think Aaron Glenn is a really the job that he's done with the Lions defense that has basically all of their starters were injured. You got to chalk that up to coaching. Like, these guys were ready. They didn't even bat an eye. They just kept going.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they were fantastic, this fantastic defense, but you're working with basically your backups there, who I'm not saying are bad players, but in the NFL to work with only backups is really incredible. That's an incredible job. So I would at least give Aaron Glenn a call and an interview and see how he does. But I don't know if he's ready to be a head coach yet. I do feel Ben Johnson is a little more ready.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Vrabel, obviously, he's already been a head coach. And then Liam Coen, I'm a little wishy-washy on him just because I do think he's done a really good job. But I also do think he's kind of benefiting from that defense. So that makes me a little weary of him. So Ben Johnson would be my number one.
Yeah, I like Ben Johnson. I think if I were the Raiders, I'd focus offensively in terms of a head coach. But I will say Ben Johnson is going to have a lot of teams that are going to be literally begging for him. To be truthful too, another coach that I would maybe hope we get an interview with would be Joe Brady of the OC, or I think it's the QB coach or the OC for the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah.
I think that would be an interesting one because look at what he's done. Would he have enough time to build a program? Very true. But I think that would be an interesting one. I do also like Liam Coen. I think that's an okay one. I'm a little apprehensive though, just because is it the players or is it the coach when it comes to the Buccaneers? I think that's what I'm a little interested in. I would say Pete Carroll kind of does interest me because he has proven to take a team like Seattle and turn them around and made them relevant for quite a few years. And I'm wondering if, just like the running joke is, if there's enough time given to these coaches, can that be done? Because Ben Johnson, clearly number one prospect, probably in all of coaching. And we won't know if he's a good coach or not until we see it. So, we're assuming that with what he's done with Detroit, can he do it on another team? And also, too, whatever front office he is with, will they get him the players that he needs? Like, what are we doing for quarterback? Because oddly enough, this now makes me kind of interested to know, like, who are we going with quarterback? Obviously we still have AOC. Are we going to be in the market for Aaron Rodgers? Are we going to be in the market for Kirk Cousins? I mean, are we going to try to trade for JJ McCarthy, which I heard is a rumor somewhere? Like, what are we doing for quarterback?
Why would the Vikings do that? Sorry,
I know.
I've been hearing that, and it's like, Why would they do that?
If I were them, I wouldn't do that either. But I think Ben Johnson, Pete Carroll, and then a third one that I probably would be really interested in. Mike Vrabel, I like, but what upsets me is I want to know what the difference is between Mike Vrabel and Antonio Pierce. What's the difference between the two of them?
That's a good point.
Because like, if we wanted Mike Vrabel, why didn't you just keep Antonio Pierce? Because there, in my opinion, I don't see anything different other than one got the opportunity in Tennessee to turn into Mike Vrabel, the coach that everybody wants, and then Antonio Pierce wasn't given that time. That's why I'm a little salty whenever I hear Mike Vrabel's name thrown out there, because we have no idea if Antonio Pierce would have turned into that or not. We didn't give him enough time. So anyways, I would say Mike Vrabel is probably my dead last person.
I need to give you a hand clap for that take. That was a good take.
Okay,
I like that. I like that. Good job.
I appreciate that.
Can I be conspiracy theorist guy here?
I'd love to. Go ahead.
Let's say what happened was Mark Davis was talking with Tom Telesco, and they were like, hey, we want Cliff Kingsbury as our offensive coordinator. And he's like, nah, they want an extra year. No, he wasn't fantastic with Arizona, but, Kyler Murray, that could be it. But let's see how he does elsewhere. Let's see what happens. And so they're like, okay, well, let's let him go. So they let him go, and he goes to Washington, and he's doing amazing, right?
Right.
So now they're like, okay. And maybe there was a deal done with Mark Davis says, all right, man, listen, right now we have to go with Antonio Pierce.
Right.
Because the players are wanting him. Okay. So in order to get you the offensive coordinator job, we can't have you with Antonio Pierce.
Okay.
Okay. I know it's crazy. I know it sounds far-fetched, but why could that not have happened? Because if he's the offensive coordinator with Antonio Pierce, I don't think Antonio Pierce is let go. I think that offense does a little bit better. So, and Cliff Kingsbury is mentioned on these top head coaching pages that keep popping up. So
sure.
I don't know. I know I don't fully believe that, but I could see a world in which Mark Davis would be like, we want you as our coach. What if we make you the head coach? So we're not going to give you that year because we don't want you working with Antonio Pierce because we want you to be the head coach.
Anytime you bring up a conspiracy theory, I need you to wear a tinfoil hat, because that one was a doozy. Like, I was with you up until you said Mark Davis's plan was not to hire him, to then hire him. Because if I'm Mark Davis and I want to run this idea, wouldn't it be easier to hire him, fire Antonio Pierce, and then Cliff Kingsbury's already in the staff, so then you can just slide him over to interim and then make it official? Like, wouldn't that be easier?
It would be easier, but my argument is, if Antonio Pierce is somewhat successful, he keeps his job. Honestly, probably one more win, he keeps his job. Would you disagree with that?
I don't know, because I don't know, because
I mean, your gut instinct. Do you think Antonio Pierce is fired if he's got 5 wins instead of 4?
Yeah, probably.
You think he stays?
No, I think
he was fired. Okay.
I think
6 wins. Do you think he's fired?
Depends on the last 2 wins. Like, are we competitive, or are we like losing by 2 touchdowns like we did?
No, how the season went, we won. Didn't matter.
See, this is tough, because like, there are some games that we could have won where this is a possibility.
Let's say we win 1 game against the Chargers, 1 game against the Broncos.
Then he stays.
Does he stay?
Yes,
he stays, 100%. Right?
Because he beats his divisional opponents.
It's not like we got killed by any of our divisional opponents. So my argument is, I think Cliff Kingsbury is good enough to get 2 more wins as the offensive coordinator, which then means that Antonio Pierce retains his job. So the conspiracy theory is Antonio Pierce gets the head coach because everyone wants him to be the head coach, because they don't want to piss off the players anymore. So what they do is they say, hey, Cliff, go somewhere else, show everybody what you can do that we know. And if Antonio Pierce is great, then hey, we're good.
Yeah.
But we don't think he's going to be the guy. We want you to be our guy, but we're going to have to wait a year.
Man, you are really working your ass off to make this conspiracy theory work. I applaud you for trying, but it's getting wilder as you try to explain it. So
I don't think it's that wild.
I think it's more entertaining, but it's on the
no,
wild side.
I know, but I mean, what if he does become the head coach? Yeah, honestly, my first thought would be like, maybe this was their plan the whole time. Yeah, maybe I've just been watching too much Scandal with my wife.
Maybe. I mean, I think the NFL, knowing them, they probably did conjure up the script or whatever. So, is there a GM that you want the Raiders to go after?
I'm not as familiar with GMs. Some of the GMs you put on here, I mean, Champ Kelly would probably be one that I would like to keep. I mean, we thought he was going to get it when
he should have gotten it, in my opinion.
Dave Ziegler got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw Mike Mayock's daughter put a tweet out there like once they fired Tom Telesco, she was like, "Let's run it back, Vegas."
No thanks.
And I thought that was kind of funny. I was like, no, I mean, if John, because there was that, it was just after the Jon Gruden was like, they were like, oh, maybe they'll interview Jon Gruden, and that, I mean, of course, that's just speculation. That's not.
Does no one in Raider Nation remember CJ Abrams? Does no one remember Keelan Farrell? Is that, I don't even remember his name. Does no one remember any of these prospects that this regime drafted, couldn't develop? They were flops. Like, no one remembers that. Everyone's got like all of a sudden amnesia. They don't remember none of this.
Everyone remembers Josh Jacobs. Everyone remembers Max Crosby, which was also Mayock.
Okay, great. But how many picks did they have?
That's
yes. Here's why. Yes, two pivotal. One is not even on the team anymore. The other one might not even be on the team later in the next season either, too. We have both had that conversation, but also
it wasn't the original GM. So
okay, sure, but like, what other person do we draft worked out? Okay, before you say Colton Miller, that's still like not that great.
Colton Miller, he's been on the team for a while, dude.
He has, but like
he's been good.
You look at like the Chiefs, you look at the Lions, you look at all these other teams that are actually good teams that have drafted, developed, and look where they're at. These players,
they also didn't let go of their head coach and GM 4 times.
Okay, take that off. I'm just kidding. No, you're right. But I think my point being is like, look, Jon Gruden brought like an attitude back to the Raiders, and there was excitement because we might have been a good team in the AFC. I just want to remind people that we weren't that great defensively. Offensively, we were still stagnant. We weren't great. So I don't want everyone to think that like we were this high-powered offense. We weren't. We were okay. We were respectable, but like we might have been 9-8, which we finished that year 9-8, you know? So I don't want to make it seem like we were this powerhouse, but also our defense was terrible. We had poor drafting. Like, I don't want that back. I'd like to upgrade and improve the GM and the head coach. I don't want to go back to what could have been. Like, let's move on. The Raiders are clearly moving on. Why can't we, you know?
Yeah. And the other guy I would say is John Spytek from Tampa Bay. I feel like he's done really well. I don't know if I can say affirmatively like, oh, Tampa's really done well with their draft picks. Like, it's kind of hard to separate that because Tom Brady was there, you know, not a couple of years ago. So it's kind of hard for me to say, oh, they've done well with this draft pick because of the GM or because of the coaching or whatever.
Yeah.
But I will say what he has done is he's put a roster together that is still winning. And you could argue a lot of people were off of Todd Bowles. They were saying he shouldn't be a head coach. He's going to probably be fired after 1 year. And not only was he not fired, but now Tampa is in the playoffs. So he's obviously got a nose or an eye for talent, and maybe people who overlook other guys, he sees something like a gem in them.
Yeah. Also, too, he was the person that brought over Baker Mayfield. He did draft Bucky Irving, who was a star running back for them as a rookie this season. Also, McMillan out of the Central Valley, he drafted him, and he was a pivotal point for the Buccaneers later in the season and helping them get into the playoffs. So I think that would be a pretty respectable one. Shout out to Brady.
The offensive line is good too.
Yeah. Shout out to Brady Patton. He said Gruden, we were average. I agree. We were average. I don't think we were that great. So everyone that wants Gruden back, just relax. And then again, Michael from Boom Broadcasting here. Would the new coach get enough time to build program? I sure as heck hope so, man.
The answer is no.
Yeah.
No.
Can you do it
Obviously.
in under 20 games? Yeah.
Obviously. Yeah.
Okay.
Can you do it under 20 games? Can you do it under 15?
Yeah. Can you do like what Jim Harbaugh did and got the Chargers into the playoffs with a roster that they didn't have to change because Tom Telesco drafted that roster? So ironically enough.
Here we go.
All right. So let's move on to the NFL playoffs. We got wild card weekend, Drew. So I'm going to give you some teams with the spread. You're going to tell me who you got and what, who's covering and all that good stuff. You know how to play this game. All right. Chargers. Yeah, you actually taught me how to play this game. So that's why I kind of say that tongue in cheek. Chargers at Texans. I think, yeah, Chargers at Texas. Chargers are favored by 3 points. Mm-hmm. Who do you got, Drew?
This is a tough one, but I actually would take the Chargers. Yeah, I would take the Chargers outright, if I'm being honest. I have been kind of down on Houston this year. I had a lot of shares, funny enough, in fantasy of Justin Herbert and CJ Stroud. Mm-hmm. And I actually, in one of my leagues, I had both of them. And for the last 10 games, I've had Herbert as my starting quarterback. CJ Stroud has not been, he hasn't gotten worse, but he hasn't gotten better. And you could call it a sophomore slump, whatever. I'm not saying anything about, I'm not ready to say CJ Stroud is a bust now. I'm not there. I'm just saying CJ Stroud hasn't done what he was doing last year. He's actually, in my opinion, been basically the same. And I would probably venture to say maybe a little worse than he was last year. And so for me, when you talk about, you got Joe Mixon on the team, you got a good receiving core in Stephon Diggs and Nico Collins and all these other guys. And then you talk about the Houston Texans defense, which is pretty good. But you look at the way the Chargers have been playing, they've been playing, I think they've flown under the radar most of this year because of everything else that's been going on, like Pittsburgh being the surprise team, Tampa Bay being a surprise team, Washington being a surprise team, Green Bay being good again. Like a lot of these teams are taking focus away from the Chargers, and the Chargers are slow and steady, but they're still going and they're still being a really good team. And it kills me to say, but I know it's in Houston. But for me, I would take the Chargers and the points.
Yeah, I'd take the Chargers and I'd pick them to go over on the points as well. And a lot of it is exactly what you said. For the Texans with CJ Stroud, earlier this year, they seemed to be really good. Then they've kind of tailed off like in the last half of the year. I think what I'm concerned with is just like what you always point out year after year. Once a team has film on you now, they can figure out how to take away your best weapon and how to minimize anything that you do to them, which CJ Stroud, not that he's not a good quarterback and won't still be a successful quarterback, just in year 2 with teams now having film on him are now able to plan against him. It does not help, though, I will say, to have an injury to the offensive line. So, of course, he's giving up a lot of sacks. You lose Stephon Diggs in the year to an injury. You lose Tank Dell to an injury. This team has been injury plagued. Let's be honest about that on both sides of the ball. So that does hinder a lot. But Houston kind of got in by default because they were the best team in arguably one of the worst divisions. And I think the Chargers come in focused. This is a team that most of these players have been on a playoff run before. Jim Harbaugh knows how to get these guys ready for deep playoff runs, which he's done when he was with the Niners. So I definitely think the Chargers here are favorite regardless of Houston. I think that they are favored to go, and I do have them going over on the points as well.
Yeah. I would also say the way I always look at things, I've said this for years, I look at head coach, quarterback, defense.
Right.
If you have 2 out of the 3, I'm going to pick you all the time. You look at head coach, I would pick Jim Harbaugh. You look at the quarterback, I would go Justin Herbert. Even last year, I would still pick Justin Herbert. And then you look at this year, I would say the Texans defense I trust more than the Chargers defense, but 2 out of the 3, I'm going to lean the Chargers.
Yeah, I'd agree. All right, moving on to the next game. Steelers going to Baltimore to play in the wild card in the AFC. This is a AFC North divisional matchup. Again, this is the third time these teams will meet. And Baltimore opens, well, I don't think about open, but the spread has gone to 9.5 points, Drew.
Yeah.
Who are you taking, and what's your cover here?
Yeah, Baltimore opened at 8.5 favorite, and now it's to 9.5, which is like still. This is crazy because this is a division rivalry game.
Mm-hmm.
Those are never 10-point blowouts. I'm sorry, it's not. Yeah. So I think the Ravens are going to win. I think overall they're the better team. I would probably take Mike Tomlin as the head coach, to be honest. I like Mike Tomlin a lot more, but if I'm going to pick defense and quarterback, I'm looking at Lamar Jackson as the quarterback. I would take over majority of the league. And then the defense this year, I think the Ravens, this year has been a little bit better in my opinion. Obviously feeding off the offense, but still that's got to count for something. So for me, I'm picking the Ravens, but I'm going to have the Steelers to cover. I don't think this is going to be a 10-point blowout. I don't think Russell Wilson is going to have this like awesome game, but I also don't think the Ravens are just going to be dropping 40. I don't see that happening. The Steelers have too good of a defense for you to drop 40 on them. And also the Ravens are going to be like, let's just run the football. Yeah. Until they prove that they can stop it. Then we have Lamar Jackson. So see what you can do, Pittsburgh. So with Pittsburgh, they still have a few holes that they need to fill before I really feel comfortable with picking them to win anything right now. They're a good team. I'm not hating on them, but against the Ravens, this is just a bad matchup for them right now. And so I would pick the Ravens to win, but Steelers to cover.
I'm going to pick the Ravens. I'm going to pick the Ravens to go over on the points, though, and the reason why is yes.
Great.
And the reason why is because, yes, you're right. It's a divisional rival. It's a wild card weekend. Both these teams have playoff experience, so they're no stranger to this. But Baltimore Ravens ended the season on a hot note, and now the Steelers ended the season on no momentum going into the playoffs and really haven't done anything in the last 5 or 6 weeks. And so Baltimore has the weapons. Granted, they're not going to have Zay Flowers, but they have Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, Mark Andrews, and they're going to have Rashad Bateman. So they're going to have other options for Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, I think, not only did he have a great regular season, but I do think that in this wild card, it'll be kind of like one of those games for him to let the NFL know that I'm not just good in the regular season. I'm even better in the playoffs, because he does have a reputation that he needs to overcome with when the playoffs start. He just doesn't seem to show up. So I think this game is going to be a statement from the Ravens. And also too, I just don't know what the Steelers offensively can do to match the firepower that the Ravens have. Even if this turns into a shootout, Steelers don't really have very many offensive weapons to combat and go back and forth with the Ravens. And I think what's going to happen is Derrick Henry is going to run the ball 30 plus times down the throat of the Steelers, and he's going to absolutely walk all over them. Lamar Jackson, a couple of play actions and some throws here is going to be very efficient. And the Steelers, I just think they probably caught fire too early, cooled off, and the Steelers are an average team at best. They just so happen to be in the playoffs or in the wild card round. And I think the Ravens have all the momentum, and they're going to totally facilitate this.
It's good to know that your dog barks too. Look, he's trying to get it. He's trying to get them situated over there.
Yeah, my son's home from work now, and so of course he has to ring the doorbell, and all hell breaks loose. So,
dog, shut the hell up.
Yeah, I wish. All right, so the next matchup, Drew, is Broncos going to Buffalo. Buffalo opens at 9-point favorites. Who do you got?
Oh God, I hate the big ones. I really do, but I can see how the Bills would get the over. I'm gonna take the Bills and the points. I think the Bills are well-oiled machine right now. I think Denver is good, but I think Bo Nix is going to get suffocated by that Bills defense.
Okay.
I do think the weather is going to play a factor. I know people are going to be like, well, Denver plays in a cold place. I know, but Buffalo's cold and Denver's cold is different. Denver's cold is more just elevation, where Buffalo's is just, I don't know how else to others say than shithole. So, it's just cold. That's all it is. It's just freezing. And so, I don't think there's going to be snow. I think they said there was not going to be, or if there was, it was going to be like very light. So it's not going to be that big. But I do think that is a huge difference.
Right.
From Buffalo to Colorado. And I've never been to both, so I could be completely wrong. But anyway, I still think the Bills are too good of a team right now. I think Bo Nix is going to show what kind of rookie quarterback he is. I think he's going to be a rookie quarterback in this game. I like Bo Nix. I think he's really good, and I was hoping the Raiders were going to draft him.
Yeah.
But I think this Bills defense is gonna be the winner here. I am not even looking at Josh Allen. And you look at the head coaches, I would take Sean Payton, but then we were talking about quarterback. I would take Josh Allen again, similar to Lamar Jackson. Probably take him over majority of the league.
Yeah.
And then defensive, I would lean the Bills. Even though the Broncos have had a really good defensive year this year, I would lean the Bills.
So nothing tickles me more than two California kids explain what the difference between two snowy places are when we don't go.
Dude, it's like snow. 46 over here.
I know, it's cold. So nothing's funnier than us trying to explain the weather differences. But I think what I would say is I would take the Bills, but I'm going to have the Broncos cover, though. So I'm kind of going a little opposite of the Ravens and the Steelers matchup. And the reason why is because I do think that the Broncos being from a cold weather city is not going to really skew anything that crazy. Like Denver's in a cold area. Buffalo's a cold area. It's known for that. But I think what the difference is Bo Nix as a rookie, he doesn't have the experience. He's probably going to come out really tight, and he's going to make mistakes. And the Buffalo Bills, this is probably their fourth or fifth year that they're really going into the wild card or the playoff situation. And they have a lot to play for. They have more momentum going into this. And I just trust the Bills, that experience, Sean McDermott getting these guys ready to go. I trust that more than the Broncos. But I do think the Broncos have found somewhat of an offensive identity. I do feel like their defense is a lot better than what they get credit for. And I do think that pressure defense can get home to Josh Allen and kind of neutralize a little bit of his running factor. But I just think that the Buffalo Bills are more experienced. They actually have more firepower than people would believe, just with Amari Cooper, the rookie wide receivers that they have.
I forgot about Amari Cooper.
Yeah, James Cook in the backfield, that offensive line. I think Buffalo will win this, but I do think the Broncos will hold close, so that's why I have them covering for the points.
Okay.
All right, so another one, Packers. This is a Week 1 rematch. Green Bay Packers going to Philadelphia. Philadelphia opens at 4-point favorites. Drew, who you got?
I'm going to pick the Eagles to win, but I actually think the Packers cover here.
Oh, wow.
And I know that the Jordan Love situation is a little worrisome, but it sounds like he's going to play. I don't think they're worried about that. Obviously, Christian Watson not being on the field will affect Jordan Love as well. But in my opinion, the Eagles are also kind of dealing with some injuries. They're dealing with Jalen Hurts, who he's still kind of questionable. And if he can't play, I think I believe Kenny Pickett is actually hurt as well. Their backup. So I'm not even confident in that one. So I think this could be a very weird game. Obviously it's going to be Saquon and Josh Jacobs heavy. I think it's going to be a lot of running from these both of these teams. So I don't think it's going to be a big score, and that's why I kind of would pick the Packers to cover. But I would ultimately say, if we're looking at we're saying everyone's healthy, we look at the head coach. I would lean LaFleur, If we're looking at quarterback, obviously, I'm probably going to go with Jalen Hurts at this point. I think Jordan Love has been good, but if I were to look at both, I would probably still stick with Jalen Hurts. And then you look at defense. I think the Eagles have the better defense of the two. So I'm going to pick the Eagles to win, but like I said, Packers cover.
Okay. I'm going to go with the Eagles as well. I do have them going over in points. It's only a 4-point spread, so really a touchdown kind of goes over. So that's what I would say. But again, with Philadelphia, kind of like what you said, in my opinion, with the Green Bay Packers, and I mentioned this, they really don't have like a for sure number one wide receiver option. So you really don't know where that ball is going. Christian Watson not being in the lineup, I don't know how much of a focal point he would have been if he was as well. Romeo Doubs seems like the guy that they usually call upon. Sometimes he goes away in big moments. Then you have Jaden Reed. How involved is he going to be? So I think Jordan Love is really good about spreading the ball around. There's just not one guy that a defense can prepare for that opens it up for everything else. And Josh Jacobs, this Philadelphia Eagles team has a very good run stop defense. So if they plug those lanes, Josh Jacobs really could just be neutralized. And now you're having Jordan Love throw, and he can throw the ball, but he's also turnover prone. Like he throws turnovers almost every game, and you can't do that with the Philadelphia Eagles. They will make you pay for it. And I think the Eagles giving the Packers a healthy dose of Saquon Barkley is going to help this. I think they're going to really rely on Saquon Barkley to relieve Jalen Hurts. I think they're going to game plan to where they're going to get A.J. Brown involved heavily, Devonta Smith. I really think that the Eagles are going to find a way to not really utilize Jalen Hurts in a rushing factor to prevent him from maybe getting another concussion or whatnot, just in this game in particular, because I think their big game is going to come after this one. I do think the Packers will hold their own, but I just don't think that they're quite there yet. I think they probably need a couple more pieces. So I got the
Packers. They're a year away in my opinion.
Yeah. So I got the Eagles and to cover on the points or to go over on the points, excuse me.
Okay.
All right, not final. Two more NFC ones to go. We got the Commanders going to Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is favored at 4 points. Who you got?
I'm looking at the new spread. So it opened at 2.5. It got up to 4. Right now it's at 3.
Oh, okay.
But either way, this might be a shock. I would actually take the Buccaneers and the points. I would take them over. And the reason being is I think the Commanders have been a really great story. They've been really good, surprising. But I feel like Tampa Bay is more old school football, where it's run the football. We got a quarterback that we can trust who's not going to turn the ball over. We have an incredible defense who's going to suffocate you. And I think Jaden Daniels is a quarterback who likes to run. And when he starts getting a little successful with his run, he starts running more and he takes some really bad hits. And I think that is going to affect him in this game. And I think Tampa Bay is not a team that you could really get away with doing that. I think they're a hard-hitting team. And so for me, again, you look at head coach, as much as Dan Quinn has been a really good coach this year, I'm still going to take Todd Bowles because he's done it for a little bit longer, a little more successfully. You look at quarterback, I'm still going to take Baker Mayfield because he's not going to turn the ball over. And then you look at defense, I'm going to take the Buccaneers on that one. So for me, it's a clean sweep. So I know a lot of people like the Commanders' defense, and they've been good. I don't want to take anything away from that. And Dan Quinn, that's his side of the ball, really. He's a good defensive-minded head coach, but so is Todd Bowles. And you look at, they have to stop Mike Evans. They have to stop Bucky Irving, who you mentioned earlier. Even Rachaad White, even though he hasn't been as good, he still is a intricate part of the offense. Chris Godwin, I mean, you look at across the table, the Buccaneers have a really good team. And not to mention that offensive line is really good, where I think Jaden Daniels doesn't have as good of an offensive line. And I think that Buccaneers defense is going to feast on him. So I'm going to take the Buccaneers and the points.
So I think majority of our picks have been aligned, and I think this one is where we're going to differ. So I'm actually going to go with the Commanders to win outright. I don't know what it is about this Commanders team. They, in my opinion, are a surprising team that's going to catch somebody sleeping. And I'm not saying that the Buccaneers are going to be falling asleep, but what I like about the Commanders is they just have this energy and this fun that they bring to the game. And for some reason, Dan Quinn has this team playing better than what anyone anticipated. And I feel like that they're going to get one victory that's going to shock a lot of people. And I think this is that one in the wild card, because Buccaneers are, as you said, favored. Now the point has come down to 3. But I think with what the Commanders have in Jaden Daniels, with the weapons that they have, the defense that is actually underrated, and I think that could give Baker Mayfield some problems, which to Baker's credit has been taking care of the ball really well, throwing it all over the field. So he's done really well. But I think the Commanders are a good team that could neutralize that and keep it close. All they have to do is keep it within a winning distance. So that way, a last-second field goal. I'm not saying that another Hail Mary or anything like that, but I think the Commanders are a good enough team to where they could shock some people, and the Buccaneers could be upset in this game. And I would say the Commanders, in my opinion, are poised to do that. So I got the Commanders to win outright in this one. All right. Final NFC game. It's the Vikings. It says at LA Rams, but of course, due to the LA fires and all that tragedy, it's going to be in Arizona now. Minnesota is favored at only 1.5 points to open, and I'm not sure if the spread has changed. So Drew, you'll have to check me on that.
Right now, it opened at 2.5. It went down all the way to 1.5. But currently it is at Minnesota favored at -3.
Okay, so we're at Minnesota -3. So who do you got in this game?
I'm picking the Rams outright.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Okay.
And the reason being is Sam Darnold has had a phenomenal year. Phenomenal year. Not taking anything away, but he's never been in this type of a big game before. O'Connell, the head coach, is a great head coach. That defense the Vikings have is really good, but I think everyone's underestimating this Rams defense has been very good. Probably the leader of this Rams team, if I'm being honest. Like, yeah, the offense has been okay. It's been good, but when you're talking about the Rams team, the reason they're winning a lot of these games and close games even, it's been because of that defense. That defense has been very underrated all year long. And again, I look at head coach, quarterback, defense. I would go Sean McVay with head coaching just because of the experience, and he's been doing it for a long time, and he's been doing it really well every year. I would definitely pick Matthew Stafford, even though he's got some injuries. Listen, Sam Darnold has had one successful year, and that's this year. So, I'm going to temper expectations a little bit. And then defense, I would probably go Vikings on that one. I think the Vikings are the better defense, if I'm being honest. But I do think this Rams defense is underrated. But for me, with the Rams as well, the Vikings have a lot that they have to cover. Not only do they have to cover Kyren Williams, who is a pass-catching back, but also is a really good, just incredible between-the-tackle running back. And probably should be mentioned in the NFL best running back discussion, because I think he's been phenomenal all year long. But you have to deal with Puka Nacua. Yeah, Cooper Kupp hasn't been fantastic this year. Obviously, injuries have kind of derailed him. But I think Cooper Kupp is something that you have to think about as well. You look at they've gotten 3 tight ends all involved somehow. I don't know how a team has done it with 3 tight ends, but they're like killing it right now. So I like the Rams in this situation because of the experience. And I understand the Vikings have been phenomenal all year. They were going toe-to-toe with Detroit, but it's hard for me to forget the Detroit game with Minnesota. And what that was is it's a big stage. It's a big deal. Whoever wins gets basically the number one spot seed in the playoffs. Yes, number 1 seed is what I was looking for. And when push came to shove, Sam Darnold kind of shrunk down. And that team kind of shrunk down. They were not ready for that moment. Now, you could make the argument, hey, they saw what they did wrong. Now they're going to do it correctly. I think that's a fair assumption. But for me, the Rams are so experienced in all the important areas. I think the Rams win here.
I really like that you went on a limb there and chose the Rams to win outright, because I thought you were going with Minnesota. In the spirit of that, I'm going to side with Minnesota. I'm going to go over on the points. And here's the thing. Yes, I would agree. Sam Darnold has had one good season. It's a heck of a season, though. It's not like it's, he's lucked into some games. There have been some games where, he has helped lead this team down the field with the stewardship of Kevin O'Connell, and he's played really well. Let's not forget, too, the weapons that Minnesota has with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson now back, and then also having Jalen Naylor, who has been a very good, supplement receiver in this offense. And you have Aaron Jones, who was a 1,000-yard rusher. So that they are going to have a well-rounded offense with Brian Flores on that defensive front. I think, too, what's going to happen is they're going to really put Matthew Stafford on his heels. I love Puka Nacua. I love Cooper Kupp. But I think the Rams have had a really good run to get into the wild card, but the Vikings I like their coaching, even though I know that Kevin O'Connell has come from the Sean McVay coaching tree. So this is kind of ironic where it's, protege going up against his teacher. But I just think that the Vikings just have a more talented roster, and they have a little bit more, what's the motivation to get there? Because I think they want to get the taste of losing to Detroit the way that they did out of their mouth, to where they get back into the contention to maybe see the Detroit Lions one more time, because essentially Detroit and Philadelphia are probably the two teams that stand in the Vikings' way to maybe even get to either the Super Bowl or an NFC Championship game. And I think the Vikings are going to come ready to play regardless of Sam Darnold. I think Sam Darnold is not a rookie. He's battle tested with being in Carolina, with being in the New York Jets, and this is a big moment. And I don't think Sam Darnold will be the reason why the Vikings falter. And I think that they will play really well. I think Kevin O'Connell will have this team ready to go. So I'm going to go with the Vikings to go over on the points.
Okay.
All right. Well, we did have one more NBA thing to go to, but it was just about Jimmy Butler. I don't know if you want to touch base on it, but
Jimmy Butler and Bradley Beal.
What's your thoughts on it?
Not much. If I'm being
very,
honest.
very poignant of you.
Listen, I don't know, Jimmy Butler.
Listen, Linda. Listen.
This is what Jimmy Butler does.
Yeah.
I mean, he gets uncomfortable in situations after a few years. Obviously, Miami, it lasted a little bit longer than probably anyone else thought. But, this is his MO. This is what he does. And now he's older. And it seems like he's getting more and more upset that not many teams want him anymore. Because it's like, well, dude, you're 36 years old, 34 years old? I don't know how
35.
old he is. Okay, I was in between.
He's our age.
God, he's old. Shoot. But anyway.
He's ancient in NBA years.
But yeah, and he's not aging like LeBron. I'm sorry. He's still an effective player, and I think he would be great on a contending team. I think there was some initial reports that he could go to Golden State. I could see him doing well with Golden State. I could see him doing really well with Houston. I think there was I forgot who mentioned it first, but I did see there was some maybe he goes to Houston. I was like, that would be fantastic, because what Houston needs is a veteran presence right now.
Yeah. And
he would be tremendous in that. And he's a defensive minded guy. So he would definitely help with that. But for me, I know there's Laker fans who are even saying, let's get him. And I'm like, that, first of all, no, that's just getting older. That's not helping the cause. I like Jimmy Butler as a player. I think he's a tremendous player. Would be lucky. If the Lakers got him, I would be excited. I would. I don't think it would work, but I would be excited. I think he could bring something that the Lakers don't have. But again, I don't think that's what's going to change what's happening with the Lakers. But again, I would be excited. I would like him on the team. I don't think it's realistic that we would get him. So but I have to bring up the Lakers somehow. Anyway, but I think if he went to a Houston or even an Oklahoma City, that would be really, really interesting. I think he could bring an added bonus to those two teams that I don't think we fully understand what he could do. But again, the asking price for Jimmy Butler right now, what Miami's asking for, is kind of like, you're never going to get that. And that's why they haven't traded him yet. That's why no one's talking about him really, because that price is going to come down when it comes to trade deadline time. And then they're going to be like, yeah, just take him.
I think Pat Riley's petty enough to not trade him and just let him
fantastic. It would be so
Pat
good.
Riley does not care, so we'll see. Look, I think Jimmy Butler to the Suns helps the Suns more than Bradley Beal to the Miami Heat, because I think Miami needs more than just a guy that can shoot the ball back. They need like a dynamic playmaker. They need a bunch of pieces to kind of like fill out that roster, because Tyler Hero's doing really well. Bam Adebayo's doing pretty well. Bradley Beal would be a nice piece, but I think Jimmy Butler brings something to Phoenix that would help. But I think Phoenix themselves, they really don't need a third option that's like a number one guy to go to. I think what they need is like length, and they need defense. So that's what I would say for the Suns. So I was kind of in the same boat with you. Jimmy Butler, this is his fourth team that he's asking to leave from. And it's Jimmy Butler. He's a good player, but after, a handful of seasons, he runs tired of them, and then he wants to leave. He throws a fit, and he gets what he wants. So I'm assuming eventually Miami may trade him if the price is right. But, I was also saying this, I think I said this to Michael on Boom, ironically enough, where I told him, Pat Riley could very easily send him to the Charlotte Hornets and just, whatever Jimmy Butler wanted to do with any competitive team, null and void, because Jimmy Butler doesn't have a no trade clause. So, Pat Riley can send him wherever he wants in the NBA, and Jimmy Butler can pitch a fit all he wants to the team that gets him. Because to Pat Riley, it's nothing to me. I'm trading you like what you've asked for. So
yeah, that's
what I would say about that. But anyways, that's it, man. That's the show. Did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No. I mean, the Bradley Beal situation, I'll just touch on that. Sure. How about I do that?
Sure.
Bradley Beal got benched by Phoenix. Yeah. And a lot of people are like, is this like one of the worst trades they've ever done and stuff? And it's like, I mean, listen, it didn't work out, but this is what everyone said, is Bradley Beal doesn't fit what they're doing. Can he shoot? Absolutely. He's a tremendous shooter. But why he was so successful in Washington was he was the primary ball handler. And they were like, well, now all of a sudden he's not going to – he wasn't even that great when they had John Wall. And a lot of people would be like, oh, well, I mean, he was really good when John Wall was there. He was really good when John Wall was hurt.
Yeah.
Because, again, he's the primary ball handler. So he needs to go to a place where he's the primary ball handler. If you want the Bradley Beal of old, that's what he has to do. He's got to go somewhere where he is the focal point, and just adding a star on top of a star on top of a star doesn't always work. And right. I think Phoenix has proven that. It seems like the second time around now has proven that it does not work.
Yeah.
Like, you look at Denver, tell me all the stars that they have besides Nikola Jokic. Like, he's their star, but he was drafted there.
Right.
And he was built up. Jamal Murray, I wouldn't even necessarily say he's a star. I think he just fits with what Denver does.
Yeah.
And so you can talk about, well, now they have Russell Westbrook. Yeah, Westbrook is now a role player. Okay, he's not a star like he was once.
Well, he's doing pretty well when he's in the lineup, but I get what you're saying though.
But he's a role, but he's not the primary guy.
He's not what he used to be. I agree.
Yeah. He's finally coming to grips with, okay, I'm not the guy anymore. So right. I think this is just another thing of why it was actually incredible. Like, everyone wants to redo what the Heat did, but the Heat did it smart. They understood. We get Chris Bosh. He doesn't always have to have the ball in his hand. Right. We have Dwayne Wade, but he works without having the ball all the time. Right. LeBron James wants the ball all the time, but is okay giving it to Dwayne Wade and saying, here, you handle it for a little while. Right. And he can still move. So that's why it was so genius with the Heat. And then when the Warriors did it, it took a guy who was literally a freaking superstar saying, "Go ahead, Kevin, do your thing. I'll sit over here and just pass me the ball whenever you want." And Durant was so grateful. He was like, "Here, you can have it sometimes too." And Steph would go for the big shot. So it takes a special kind of not only players but team to be able to handle that. And
Right.
I'm sorry, but Phoenix has proven time and time again now that they can't get it done.
Phoenix tried doing the old school, just put a bunch of talented people together with no structure, no nothing, and it doesn't work. I mean, it didn't work in Brooklyn. It did not work in what was another one that OKC tried doing this when they brought in Carmelo and Paul George and Westbrook. That didn't work. You know, I think Phoenix is showing that, you know, having these mega teams or whatever super teams just doesn't work anymore. You know, it's just not how basketball can be played.
It can work, but you have to have the right people in the building. And if you don't, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Plain and simple. And it reminds me of the joke from Jim Gaffigan. It's like, you know, you would think like fruit cake would be this great thing. Like you think fruit, good, cake, great, fruit cake, nasty crap.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel like. They were like, oh, Bradley Beal, good. Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, great. You put them together, nasty crap.
Yeah. Perfectly said. I think we're going to end it on that, Drew. So thank you guys.
Crap, yeah.
Nasty crap. We'll end it on that. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and watching and commenting. Appreciate all of you guys. If you guys are watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel and also give us a shout out, give us a comment, share it around, and you can listen on the audio version wherever you get your podcast at. So Apple, Spotify, iHeart, we're all on those. And then follow us on social media. Don't know what's going to happen with TikTok. I think we'll be on there, but eventually not, I suppose. So who knows? But you can find us on all the other platforms and follow us and engage with us. Really love when we're able to interact with you guys. So I appreciate everyone for watching.
Yes.
Drew, do you have anything to say to the lovely people?
No, thank you guys for the years that we've been doing this. And again, like what Cody was saying, is the comments on the videos on YouTube, on lives, whatever it is, like we really appreciate it. And it means a lot to us. We've been doing this for a while now, and it's something that we do that's fun, but we also like to engage, and we appreciate all that support that you guys give us.
That's right. Thoughts and prayers to those in the LA area that are affected by the wildfire. It's really hard to see. So, you know, whatever you guys can do to support and to help uplift over there, do what you can. Be kind to one another. We will catch you guys on the next episode, and we will see you guys.
See you.